Welcome back, Poggers, to another episode of the Pog State. I'm your host, Atlus. I'm joined by Valdes, Chronicler, and Wolf over there for what is going to be a post-Week 8 episode. Amazing that we have come all this way in what feels like such a short time, but it is actually just the same amount of time minus, 1 week due to the Asia Games qualification that is going to be happening. There are no more elephants to address. There is, in fact, an 18-0 to have a look at, and this episode is going to be all about the playoffs. You guys have witnessed the entirety of Week 8. We are yet to see the final day of matches. Should be the 2-0 for T1 up against Frederick with unfortunate COVID-related circumstances, and therefore should not stand too much of a chance against the team that is currently ridiculously undefeated here in the LCK. And then we have one more match as well. So, gentlemen, the playoffs.
What's up?
This is sort of like, it's feeling a little bit like T1 and the other teams moving into the playoffs here. Of course, just to confirm, guys, T1 has not confirmed first place. If they lose, well, actually, they probably have. But as of right now, they haven't. If they get 0-2'd by Fred at Brion, there is still a universe.
Yeah, so, I'm always really optimistic about Challengers roster's chances. It's not one of those days. This team is and when I don't have any hope, it's a newly formed team. It's a lot of inexperienced players, and even in Challengers, they haven't looked great. They have the best names out of I'd say Korea.
Yeah, when we're digging into the names of the players,
that's what you know.
But moving into what we expect for the playoffs, I think that most of us think that Quantum Freaks are going to make it there. I think it's that last spot that's really going to be up for grabs.
I don't see Fred Abriel making it. Unfortunately,
I'm not sure I agree because while getting COVID is really unfortunate and we don't wish it on any of the players, the timing is actually really good because Fred Brion beating T1, there are the memes, they've done it before, right? It could happen. Maybe Umpty just somehow gets it done, but I don't think realistically, especially with this T1, we could have expected Fred Brion to take that matchup anyway. So it's if you're gonna get COVID, get it now, get it out of the way. You were going to lose to T1 anyway. You have some rest days, and then maybe you come back strong for playoffs. But I wonder if they'll be there on time for the beginning of next week.
Yeah, that's the question.
Which is the real question.
But also their match, their last three matches, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get
T1,
into.
Damwon, Kia, and Gen G. So,
they could beat Damwon.
All three of these, I think they could, but, their playoff percentage is actually not based on any of their three remaining matches, but it's actually based on how well KT does. The expectation with this 83% is still that Fred Brion will lose all of those games, but KT will also lose their matches. So if KT upsets, that's how Fred Brion doesn't make playoffs, actually.
Yeah, and KT's matchups, against Gen G, sure, that might not be doable, but against Nongshim in their current form.
Yeah. That one.
I'd be feeling pretty good about that one.
Yeah.
And that's for me the core thing, is that I think Fred Brion's remaining schedule, even if they do have the full roster, I think they can win against Damwon Kia. I think it would be incredible. This roster has had their fair share of ups and downs, but they're really easy to root for. They're very easy to love. But I do also feel like current form Damwon Kia, I don't see losing anymore. Was this 3-4 weeks ago? I think it would have been pretty likely. But with their topside weaknesses being shored up, and the fact that even though the team sometimes looks a little bit janky, a little bit slow, they are still really hard to beat. And that's really a key difference as well. If you look, DRX is currently third, but Damwon Kia doesn't get 2-0'd ever, right? Whereas DRX has days where they just don't show up at all. And for Fred Brion, I think that match against, if that was DRX instead of Damwon, I think you'd feel a lot better because DRX at some days is just we didn't get Heckler on PO Shakes, and Barrow wasn't feeling himself today. He can't play the RTS where he just micromanages everyone. Shucks. So then we get 2-0'd by Humble Life, I guess.
Think about it this way. KT right now, so I'm looking at the standings right now. Fred Brion, -1 game score. KT, -5 game score. We're living in a world where very likely KT will win their match against Nongshim. I think they're probably 2-0 that one. And then they'll lose their match against Genji, so -2. So they'll probably end up being at -5,
it's
at the end.
It's going to be up to who loses less.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. So Fred Brion, they need to win some games here because if they end up losing all three of their remaining matches, and go 7-11 to tie with KT at 7-11, because I think we are going to have a 7-11 split between these two. If they lose all three,
please.
they'll be -7.
Sponsorship.
So if they end up being -7 and KT are -5, then KT actually just win by game score, and they will actually get that playoff spot. So Fred and Brion actually need to take some games here. And regardless of their roster, like some of these games need to go their way, because I think KT 2-0 Nongshim gets 0-2'd by Genji. I think that's like pretty easy expectation. The expectation for Fred and Brion is they get 2-0, 2-0, 2-0'd. They need to make sure that doesn't happen, or like it's like set in stone. Like KT are going to get through, I think.
Unless Kwangdong also messes up and loses against Hanwha Life and Sandbox, which I don't think should happen.
Yeah, I don't think so.
However, well,
Yeah.
you say that. I don't think. I just want to reiterate. I don't think it should happen. I think this Kwangdong, as they have shown their form over the last few weeks, is a playoffs team. But I just want to that's I think the cool thing about playoffs is that between Fred and Brion, Kwangdong and KT, there's going to be a bunch of scenarios that all are equally likely at this point. I think the most likely is Kwangdong KT. I think the form of the teams and the remaining strength of schedule kind of backs that up. But imagine if it's just KT and Fred and Brion, or Kwangdong and K. I don't know.
I don't think it's KT. Looking at this, I just don't think it's KT.
You don't have faith.
No.
Why not? Do you think Fred and Brion is going to take games off
They're
of
just gonna
Damwon,
randomly
Kia,
lose to
Genji,
Nongshim.
and
Well, I think that if anyone's going to
T1?
win some random games, it's going to be Fred and Brion.
but it's not Umpty. It's not that roster, I mean, it
they're
will.
They're not
be
going to win
in
against
theory,
T1, but they can win. They can take random games.
But will they take the random game? I think the most likely to take is a Damwon, Kia one, because it's the easiest of the three opponents, and it's the last
No.
one. So
it'll
they
be a
might
Genji
have.
game because Genji drop games and
But
Fred and Brion
also-
win games.
But also, Fred and Brion have a history of beating Damwon, Kia. They also have that match against Damwon, Kia when they will, in theory, have their roster back on the 19th. So that one is winnable. But I think you've got to drop. Genji has to drop a game, like you're saying, against them next week or on Wednesday.
I'm just thinking what's the team most likely to disappoint you
Hey.
out of Fred and Brion and KT?
Well,
And as a KT fan for many years, I know exactly what the correct answer to that question is.
at the same time, we have the opportunity to make history because KT and Fred and Brion are the only teams since the LCK went to franchising to never make
Playoffs.
playoffs.
One of the two of them will get in.
Yeah, but we might also get both if Kwangdong somehow botch it, which again I hope doesn't
mean-
happen, and it definitely shouldn't.
it
because
definitely won't happen.
It's Hanwha, and
Is
I'm-
there any world at all where neither of them get in? Yeah, I guess that's
What?
whenever
Well,
if
one of them
Liv
has to.
Sandbox or Nongshim.
No,
if
those-
Liv Sandbox or Nongshim can possibly do
no,
it.
they can't.
They
anymore.
can't.
No,
Nongshim's out.
it's
Nongshim's eliminated.
They're
yeah,
out.
They're all
Or
out.
is it actually all just dead?
Yeah, it's all just it's
Yeah.
like one of
2/3
we're
of the
gonna have a
remaining
new
teams will
team
get in.
Right.
in playoffs. I'd say Kwangdong KT, but
All right, yeah.
Fred
no,
and
of
Brion
course.
should have the
I
plot armor, right?
misinterpreted everything, and I'm like, it's 12, but there's I don't know. I had a little bit of a brain mistake. So yeah, there is a guarantee that we do have one of those two, but I think it's going to be Fred and Brion. I agree with the stats.
I don't think so. I think that the stats didn't trust KT's recent form,
And
also
that's why
Nongshim
it's
are-
going to happen because this man sounds a bit excited.
I'm not
KT's
excited.
recent
I'm just
form?
looking at the numbers. KT's recent form,
I mean, they dragged themselves across the line against Liv Sandbox. I guess that.
but
I mean-
look. There's two
they'd be
there's
looking
two
a lot
teams
better.
left.
And
Okay,
that's
do
not
you,
Liv
are we
Sandbox.
gonna make a bet right now, Valdes? You think
I think
Nongshim is gonna
Rascal's
be?
good.
You think Nongshim is gonna be?
Class good.
Do you think Nongshim is gonna take a game off KT roster? Yes or no, Valdes? Yes or no question. Do you think they will take a
could.
game?
They could.
Because they need to, or Brion is not getting in.
Okay, let's
I mean,
let's
it's not
break
that cut
down.
and dry.
Let's break down that matchup just real quick because that actually it makes me really happy to talk about this, right? Because there is no world where Nongshim should be in this position anyway. So if you go down the line, right? You've got Canna there towards the top side of the map. He's been dealing with Rascal throughout most of his career. In fact, got famous by being better than Rascal in a lot of matchups when he was on
Okay.
Gen G, right? Dread has been very, very good in the past.
When again?
Yeah. Vikla is
This
a
season.
challenger player, he was leading Pog points by 500 at the beginning of the season. Like, we don't have short memories here. We like to keep things in perspective. BDD versus Vikla should never be close because Vikla's fresh from Challenger, and BDD was like one of our like LCK representative MVPs at Worlds, right?
Vikla also looking really inconsistent with playing really well and then also playing really poorly against Live Sandbox.
And
so
BDD
who knows his
designed that playstyle, right?
Man, have you considered a career as a politician, Max? 'Cause this is some great spinning that you do.
Well,
Continue.
but like
Continue.
this is the world that we're in, where them losing 0-2 is the absolutely expected outcome. And I
Yes.
just want to illustrate just how ridiculous that is with the power of this team. Like, Nongshim should be good, but they are not. Now, they're 100% eliminated. There is no more expectation on them. And if there's ever a team to play spoiler, it's a team that has now had of everything released from them. Like, they're going to do it. It's
Maybe
gonna
No.
because that's the ultimate disappointment.
No.
You cannot be more disappointing
Okay.
than being eliminated and then
this
playing
is a man
well.
that's been hurt by KT too many times.
Let's talk about Nongshim's playstyle though, right? Right now, I'd say BDD. I'll be the first to say this actually on a recorded or official media because I think we're all feeling it. I think BDD is the worst mid laner in the LCK at this moment in time. Besides substitutes, Arya, etc. And he's a momentum-based player, right? He's a player who's when his team is doing well and when he's feeling himself, he does extremely well, right? The peak of BDD is not something we've seen since the beginning of the season. Then you've got Dread, who's also a very emotional player who has been very tilted throughout this season. And you've got Kana, who's also the same type of emotional player on the top side of the map. Ghost, he's just along for the ride. Like, he's like, oh, man, I'm just trying my best to win these games.
He's had some really good
actually
games
been-
recently.
No, I know. He's along for the ride. Like, he's
carry.
actually doing his best, okay? But when you have nothing to play for, when you have nothing to win for, you have no playoffs on the line, and everybody's tilted, and KT have everything to play for, it's extremely important for them to 2-0 that. Like, I just don't see it happening.
They're
Like,
Nongshim 2-0 100%.
I don't see it
There's
happening.
absolutely no way they win that.
You forgot to mention Peter, by the way.
Yeah.
well,
I
I don't think he's going to be playing, so. Peter and Effort also,
We'll
like,
see.
really both not having a good time over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I honest to God have no idea. There's too many converging like timelines happening because what is more likely is Nongshim continuing their form, which I think should be expected. A KT that just randomly disappoints their friends, and not only that, but we haven't even talked about the Fretted Brian plot armor, and we're thinking maybe it gets Fretted Brian a win, but what if instead it's the plot armor making sure that KT loses 2-0 against Nongshim? It's a possibility as well. I just want to put it out there. Because with how everything has been going thus far, I still firmly believe that KT should win that matchup like rather comfortably. I think that looking at their recent form, even with some of the laning inconsistencies that I think they do add, as you pointed out, Valdes against Sandbox, the overall direction of the team has been infinitely better. I think Cuz has really benefited from Vikla, although Vikla has been inconsistent in terms of laning phase. I think that the relative improvement of mid lane being a bit more stable still has really helped Cuz out. He looks a lot more confident, which again, I guess, is also a perfect opportunity to just not do that randomly for a series. It's so hard. I don't know with this game. And like, there's just everything you say is like, yeah, that makes sense. There, that one can't be done. It's like Schrodinger's LCK playoffs game, like playoffs.
That's the
contention
best thing
game.
the best thing is that if you guys are watching this episode as it's coming out, that game will be happening like right now, basically. I think that this should be coming out just before, and that is, of course, the first game on Wednesday is Nongshim versus KT.
It's just breaking my brain.
I know. It's so good, right? And, like, I was obviously being a little bit facetious. I think that especially with how Vikla has debuted into the LCK, it's been far beyond what my expectations were for the player. And I even sometimes watch Chronicler's stream and observe some of the challenger players. And Vikla actually, he didn't turn my head that much.
No, it was
He was
okay.
serviceable.
KT was an all-around good team, but they also have Noah and Rebel, which are pretty great players.
Yep.
We've seen them both in the
know
LCK.
Noah. Yep.
Yeah.
Rebel
So-
and Kesper
Yeah,
Cup.
exactly. So they're good. They're an upper echelon team, but it wasn't really until we actually saw him debut that it was.
Yeah, and he looked
Pretty
good in
ludicrous.
losing games as well, which is
I got Faker's praise. That's
Yeah.
on a debut. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. And I
Vikla?
actually I kind of value a player that can still look good when his team's not in a good spot, right? Because it's much easier to look good when you're winning, and much more difficult to like try and find openings and still look good
The Croco effect.
when everything is falling apart.
Actually, it's
If that happens too much, then it becomes a problem, right? It's like, oh well, like obviously they're not playing for their team enough, or blah blah blah. There can be those sorts of things, but from what we've seen from Vikla, it hasn't really been that.
Vikla has been a very proactive player in lane, sometimes to his detriment, and I think that he looks somewhat inconsistent because of it. Like sometimes he'll try to make a big play and it backfires, and he'll end up losing a wave. He usually doesn't die and get solo kill in lane, although it has happened. I think against BDD, like I could see a world where he actually solo kills BDD. BDD gets like frustrated. He's like solo kills BDD again, and that's like okay, the game is decided. Like that's how poorly I think the mid matchup goes for Nongshim right now. And BDD is just like out of his element. He's mentioned several times in interviews since he recovered from COVID, he hasn't felt like he's really gotten his headspace back. Like he's not actually in the right mentality right now. He's still kind of, I don't want to say he's got like long COVID, but he's still recovering. Like he's not 100% fit yet. And I really think that's like the biggest hole for BDD or for Nongshim is BDD in this matchup. Like I just want to reiterate. I know we're talking about like some like theoreticals and like excited for KT and curses and stuff, but like I think on paper like this should be a 2-0. Like I have no doubt. I think Fredit Brion somehow need to steal some wins away like from these top 3 teams. Like that's my angle for Fredit. Like steal some wins away. Steal a win against T1 tonight if they draft weird. Prove that the Challengers roster is awesome. You know, try it, please.
Yeah. Fredit Brion only need to win 2 games. I know it's difficult with their schedule. But just 1 game here, 1 game there, and they can tie a KT that takes a 2-0, which is assuming that they take a 2-0. I kind of agree, but at the same time, Vikla did look really just out of it and like free food in the mid lane against Liv Sandbox. Like that was a Liv Sandbox Challengers team basically who were coming in and they 0-2'd him really early because he was pushing really hard, not aware of the current lane state, and he got ganked multiple times. And the one issue I see is that Dread and BDD aren't really working well together. So I don't know if they can pull off the same thing as even the Liv Sandbox Challengers team, but if they can do it a couple times in pressure, I don't think it's going to be as one-sided as you think.
To be fair, one of those deaths was he was under his turret and then he was flashed on. There was Leona roaming up and there was
he got
free.
That was the second game.
Yeah, I know.
The first game where he got 0-2'd, he was just standing super far in the lane.
No, I know, and I don't disagree with you overall. To me, the interesting angle when it comes to Nongshim versus KT is that I think that Ghost has actually been the best part of Nongshim, which is weird because he's also been the worst part of Nongshim.
But right now he is. I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, like, as the rest of his team has kind of taken a downturn, he's been looking better and better.
The problem is he's also kind of looking like the best support option as well right now.
I guess.
If Ghost could just solo the bottom lane with a duplicate of himself.
What if they bring Vital up and Ghost plays support? Then do we see the Nongshim angle?
That doesn't even look that good.
Because I'm like, my actual point is that I think life and aiming have been way better, and people have been banning for 3, 4, 5 80 carries against aiming, and then he just picks another one and still kind of dunks on people.
Well, he also picked super OP Kai'Sa twice.
Well, but no,
For some reason,
but like, do you?
let that happen.
I agree. I agree that obviously they really highly prioritize Kai'Sa. I think the pick is really stupid, and I hope the AP build gets nerfed. Hybrid build is a little bit different. But do you think that if aiming would have gotten in those matchups, like if he'd gotten Kalista instead, or if he'd gotten Caitlyn instead, he would not have done the same thing?
I think it would have done it even harder, probably.
Yeah, so that's kind of my issue. I don't really feel like Nongshim is going to be able to stand up in terms of bot lane because they just look. That's their one angle, and I think the angle looks bad.
And actually, but I actually think that is what plays exactly into their hands. Because what is Ghost's true skill? Ghost has one thing that he's absolutely phenomenal at. No, he's really, really good at beating teams that have very good bottom lanes. If a team plays through their bottom lane, Ghost absorbs that pressure. That is what he got famous for. That's why they won Worlds, right? Like, that is why Ghost was on that team and what his job was on that team. That is why Nongshim on paper look like a team that should be good. because they can play through Canna, who needs to be played through, and they put Ghost in weak side. So I actually think that what you're talking about with aiming being good should be something that Nongshim can actually capitalize on. The problem is, none of the actual assessment of what these teams are good at matters at all, because Nongshim just look way worse than they should. They're like, nothing makes sense. They're all just perma-tilted, and it sucks, because this team has so much potential. I'm really glad that this is spring, because...
Agreed.
Like... If this is summer, I'd be so depressed because afterwards the whole team will go boom and we won't get to see what the potential is
This
of
kinda
what
does happen
seems
in
like
spring.
on paper it's like a good thing.
If they swap out, if they can find a support pick that works for them, I would be shocked not to see this team end up in like a very decent playoff standing in summer.
No, absolutely.
just
I think that there'll be like a race for playoffs, and the fact that they have no championship points from spring is going to really hurt them. I think that that's what's going to happen. We're going to be like, oh, damn, why did they suck? They shouldn't have sucked.
Yeah, I actually think that is exactly what will happen. They'll be like, oh, top 4 in summer, and we'll be like, oh, well, we don't have the gauntlet anymore. Is this team going to make it to Worlds? I don't know. I think that's actually not a bold prediction. I think it's extremely likely that exact scenario will happen.
Oh, actually, okay. So now this is a beautiful segue, Wolf. I think because I think we've done it to death. The like KT versus Nongshim. I think we can all say that it's probably going to be Quantum Freaks KT
2-0
making it up
Nongshim.
there, but like.
But we don't know because it's KT.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I still think that's going to happen. But never mind. It's neither here nor there. It's one of those three, right? Quantum Freaks could also get up there as well. Fred Brian could also get up there as well. We don't necessarily know. We'll see how thick that plot armor is. But how strong is our top 4 right now? Because I think we have to. You have to always talk about each season as. What is the top 4 looking like? They're here in the LCK, the teams that we're going to be sending to Worlds. And what Wolf just said about is Nongshim going to be in the conversation for top 4 moving into summer, right? Like, is that ridiculous? Because, right now they're 8th, right? So it should theoretically be ridiculous. But how strong is our top 4 that we have here at the moment? And I think, like, that's a really cool discussion to have. So let's have it.
So do you wanna compare it to something specifically, like last year's spring, or because I think there's some interesting parallels to be drawn where you have one team that's very clearly ahead of everyone else. Last year it was Damwon. Right now it's obviously T1, and then you have 2 teams that you feel like should be pretty close, which I guess would be Gen G and Damwon. I feel like Damwon in a playoff setting is, even though DRX is currently ranked above them, would be in its current form a team that I'd be more afraid of. But I don't know how you guys feel about
Gen
that.
G is a good step
Still-
ahead of Damwon.
Still,
in
yeah,
my
still
mind.
ahead. Yeah,
I think
I
it's
tend
like
to agree,
T1
actually.
is way up there, and then we have Gen
Gap,
G here, and then
Gen
like
G,
DRX
Gap.
and Damwon down here.
For me, I think we have T1 is S, Gen G is A, and then DRX, Damwon, Kia are B, and then the rest of our teams are like unranked. Like they don't even get to be a part of this conversation. But
Yeah.
I think there's a huge gap between T1 and Gen G, but then I think there's a huge gap between Gen G and DRX and Damwon Kia at Gen G's peak, right, with their
Yeah.
full roster, et cetera, because there have been some hiccups along the way. And the question about how strong our top 4 is overall, like I think we have a very clear top 2. The question is how strong are DRX and Damwon Kia? And we haven't seen like their final form just yet, I think. Both of these teams were like ramping up really hard. And I could see a world in where DRX actually end up being the stronger team than Damwon Kia in the end. And, we might not necessarily actually see that matchup in playoffs, which is really sad. But I think that they're a huge cut above whoever is going to get those last 2 playoff spots that we have
I
been
agree.
talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
Which-
there's like such a huge gap.
Which, ladies and gentlemen, is a good reason to watch on Thursday, because Thursday's game is going to be Damwon Kia versus DRX. Definitely a hype one. We'll see you there. No, I 100% agree. For me, it's there is a slight difference. There's a slight difference because for me, like if I was to go into the tier list creator, it'd be really easy. It's T1, Gen G, Damwon, DRX.
Yeah.
I think that there is almost T1's like up here in like Ludicrousville, but then it's like Gen G equal gap Damwon equal gap DRX because DRX don't have the consistency yet.
No,
I think
I'd
that
agree.
they have the potential to be a really good team. And I'm obviously like ridiculously biased towards Deft and always have been my entire career. I don't know why I haven't been like
the only
way
real
more
bias
called
here
out.
at the LCK.
Yeah, like I actually like I never get called out for that. I always get called out for other. And I'm like, guys, this is where I am like actually biased. Like,
I've been saying this on stream so many times as well. Like, we always get called out for biases that don't exist when there's super like.
Yeah,
have you
it's like,
ever
guys.
have you ever heard Valdes talk about Carry Our Peter? Right? Have you heard Max talk or Atlus talk about obviously Deft? Me with any challenger players, like, no, they'll be good any day now,
you were
guys.
an example of that literally just before when you were talking
I
about
know.
Vikla being good against Peter. Oh my god!
I
And
know,
like,
but like, and
if you want to actually damage us and our feelings, please
Call
actually
that
go
out.
for the stuff that's true.
it's really interesting. I personally feel like the Damwon Kia peak is still higher. And I think if you look at the way that Damwon Kia lost a lot of series, and you see this reflected in map score as well, I do think that ever since they settled on this roster, they've gone, 2-1 against all the teams that they lost against, right? Like T1, actually they 2-1'd. Gen G, they got 2-1. Gen G, they got 2-1 twice. And I do think that going into playoffs, I'd feel a little bit more confident about that, because as good as Deft and Barrel has been, I think Zaka has been slowly ramping up. But King and NPO to me still remain something that I'd be a little scared about, because especially with the over-reliance on Hecarim, Kingan's form being a little up and down.
I actually think we
I'd
might be
be
sleeping a
little
little bit
worried.
on Kingen, because I think Kingen had a really like terrible start to the season, but has been like, and I knew that Wolf was about to talk about this, so maybe I'll let you take the floor on it. But like, I think Kingen has been actually very consistent in comparison to like actual just Pyosik might not exist on a daily basis.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
think
fair.
Pyosik is the least consistent part of the roster now. I think Kingen is pretty good. Like, he's not at, like, Kingen versus Birdall is a really interesting conversation to have, because Kingen's like the veteran and he should be better on paper. He's playing more like a rookie this year, whereas Birdall is like ramping up. So like that matchup is really exciting.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the problem with these solo laners is it's Kingen and Zeka, right, versus Showmaker and Birdall is one of the most hyped top laners to come into the LCK. So I think people aren't giving Zeka proper credit, like you were saying, like because the start wasn't great for Kingen, the start wasn't great for Zeka. Where in reality, I think Showmaker and Zeka are a lot closer than like those two names feel like. If you like put those two names on paper, it's everyone's like, who's Zeka? Like Showmaker versus Zeka. But it's actually like a lot closer.
Yeah.
And then I think personally, I was the most exciting part of Dom1's roster for me this season was going to be the bottom duo, right? Okay, Duck Dom and Kellen on a really good team. Like, how's this going to work out? Right now, I think Deft Errol is a stronger bot duo. Like, I think Duck Dom and Kellen have had their moments. Like, but Duck Dom and Kellen have also, like, I think in their best games have been given prio and just killed plates. And then Duck Dom's like, well, you guys gave me Caitlyn into this. I win the game. I kill a lot of turrets. I think that Deft has been a better playmaker. I think he's been more consistent. I think his team fighting has been better overall. And I think it's a lot closer than we make it seem to be, just because those soul lanes do kind of stick out as like, well, Birdall versus King, and there's no way. And then you look at the mid lane, you're like, well, Showmaker versus Zeka, like I don't even want to have this conversation. But it's a lot closer than it looks. Now, Canyon versus Pyosik, like, that's where the real gap is.
Yeah,
like, that's where it's like
That's
the
the
real gap. Like, I think every other aspect like is closer than the names show, but the Pyosik versus Canyon is like that's
No,
the
the way
problem.
that sentence is supposed to go is like everything is closer than it's supposed to go, but none of it matters because Canyon exists. Is basically what. we're
honestly,
saying.
as long as you don't give Pyosik Hecarim, Canyon's gonna monster gap him, I think.
Which
The
kind
only-
of means
way
that
bigger
if Damwon
champion
are on
pool.
blue side,
Yeah.
then DRX lose.
Because I think the only player that we've seen, I think Owner again has been extremely consistent, but Owner is really interesting in a T1 team that like the players when they are highest are is insane, and when they're quote unquote lows, they're still really good. Owner is just like always an 8 out of 10. So I don't think he comes to mind as much. The only player that has truly gapped Peanut, there we go, that has kept Canyon
Yeah.
this split, I think, has been Peanut, who at that Jarvan game was disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, that was actually, it was insane. It was incredible to watch. And
I think
just don't see...
Owner did do it, but
No,
like,
he does, but
it
it's
doesn't
not
look as obvious because everything is on fire for Damwon in those games.
No,
Like,
yeah, like the fact that Owner can get invaded level 1 and then still have a really impactful game says
if
an
you peer
incredible
through the
amount.
smoke, you can see. Oh,
Yeah.
Owner's doing really well.
It
versus
is.
Canyon.
But like
Yeah,
Owner
that's
Owner is literally just suffering from being on T1
Yeah.
in that regard. Like in terms of public perception, because all his other players are way more like high profile. But
Guys, can you stop winning as much? I need to look good too.
remember, like T1 was saying as well, right? I don't remember which game was like, yeah, we tried to get everyone POG points, and like, Owner, yeah, I went for a really nice kick and I still got no votes. It sucks because he's been so good. But basically, outside of Peanut and Owner, I think no one is going to get Canyon still in the LCK, and I agree with Wolf. The gap is too big. I really liked your Zeka Showmaker call out because Showmaker is still, unless he's on TF, like kind of what's going on? What's going on, Showmaker? Like,
He's not. He doesn't feel like he's at his peak form at the moment.
No, not at all. Not even close. I'd say he's still top half, but even that, you might pick Lava over him. I think that's a take you can take.
He's the
I
king.
think I would.
If you're feeling flippy, you can take Carvis over him in some situations.
And you'd always take Vikla over him, right?
No, I'm not even me is that insane, Max. Come on. There's limits. Zeka again, I think has been really good. So that matchup is actually really cool. It just is DRX going to be able to solve the Canyon problem.
Yeah. And
I don't know if they will.
Yeah, that's the thing that's real tough. You got anything to add, Mr. Valdes?
Not really.
All right,
I think we've hit that one. Canyon's really good, and I think he should be able to single-handedly win that one for them.
So-
I think that Damwon, with how strong Canyon is going to be incredibly scary when it comes to best of fives. Like, and when it really comes down to it, like, even if Showmaker looks like half of his form right now, I think he'll turn it up for when it really matters. Like, the guy has experienced burnout. He hasn't been, his true self here at the spring season, but I'm sure in summer he's going to look amazing, and playoffs he's going to look amazing. And we see glimpses of it. I think he just needs to, like, the class is always there, right? The class is permanent. The form is temporary. So once we do get into the important games, I think that absolutely Damwon will be a stronger team because they have Canyon's Showmaker. It's just that never goes away.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing that I think sucks is that we're a one-team region again. We only have T1.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
All the other teams suck.
Another fantastic segue given to me this time by Chronicler, where we get to talk about is T1 just really, really good, or does every other team suck and our region is getting worse?
I don't want to take it first.
I'll take point on this. Well, obviously, as we saw last year, where there were similar issues with Damwon kind of being ahead of the curve. I think maybe after like all our teams made it to quarters, and we had 3 teams in the semis of Worlds, not winning Worlds by 1 game and not winning MSI by 1 game shouldn't be a definitive, take like, oh yeah, see, the LCK sucks after all because they haven't won anything since 2020 Damwon, and that was just
Have you
the
seen
only good
V5?
Well,
I mean,
no. Like, I don't even like the LPL is also an incredibly strong region, but my
they
main
took
point
our
is,
best top laner, Rich.
Shut up, Max.
Oh my god.
Don't talk to me
Any
about
Summit
Rich.
enjoyers in the chat?
But honestly, this is a team that was 1 game away from making it to the finals awards last split, right? Like, that in of itself, they just have maintained the same force, and they've upgraded their top side. So, like, yes, of course the team is ludicrously good, but you can put a DRX and a Damwon Kia that sometimes look weak within the context of the LCK in any other region. I'd be feeling pretty confident, honestly. I think the LCK is still really strong. The only really big difference with summer, as will happen, I think, a lot in spring, it's just a lot more inconsistent, right? Teams are still meshing together. I think Damwon and DRX both are incredible examples of this, where it's like, how do we work together? Because these players are good, but is it going to work? Nongshim is the bad example of this, where in their case it hasn't worked, and maybe it will in summer. And the only thing that I think is justified criticism for T1 is not their first place and how far ahead they are of everyone. It's their undefeated streak, which I according to the players, I don't think they care about as much.
No.
That's the only thing where I'd be like, would Gen G really not have taken one of those series? We will never know. There is no doubt in my mind that T1 is the best team in the LCK at this given point. The only thing is they might not have gone undefeated. I don't think that much would have changed. And
yeah,
we
I don't
will
want
never
to. I don't
know.
want to add. I don't want to add an asterisk. I think we've
No, I
had
don't think we
conversations
should.
about the asterisk, and I just don't think that we need to. I think that T1 have performed extraordinarily well, and it was interesting. We had the chance to chat to Joe Marsh here at LOL Park and had a bit of a discussion with him about current form T1 and what he expects of the rest of the league. And we had a conversation about the strength of the LCK a little bit that we touched on. And he was just talking about the fact that, like, T1 kept their roster for a reason, right? They didn't need to build the synergy. They wanted to build up Zeus, who was already there and already starting to develop the end of last year. But what they wanted to do was really nail home a set group of players that could really begin to work together. And we've seen that already. Like, the macro play is just amazing. But another thing that he mentioned was the fact that all of these other teams were going to be coming for them eventually, right? Like, they needed to build up. They needed to get to the point where they're getting to now. And illustrate, like, I think his example was Kwandong Freaks, and that's one that I'd like to use as well. This is a team that started off looking terrible. DRX, very similar situation, but Kwandong Freaks, like, observing their development over the season has been really, really fun because, like, think of it like a gold graph, right? Like, they're down 4,000 gold at the start, but it's linear. It's growing. Whereas T1, it's hard to know, like, what's the scale of this graph of, like, more winning equals this amount of winning, but winning's binary, and the amount of winning we don't really know, and it's all compared to, like, all these teams that are starting to ramp up. And so, yes, maybe it's exponential, but we don't necessarily know by how much. And are these other teams improving more? Like, it's such a cool thing to watch. But when you've got a region that's so top heavy, and you see, like, how much has that team changed? What has made this team so much better this season? And the answer is more synergy, more time together, and no actual change of roster. Sorry.
No.
I think I got excited.
You were good. You had a really great point. I just wanted to kind of go off of the last thing that Mao said about, like, the LCK at Worlds. The LCK has, like, ridiculous standards.
Yeah.
Like, insane. And what I mean by that is that people hold the LCK to such an incredible standard that it's almost unattainable.
Oh, it is.
That if we're not winning Worlds every year, then LPL is better, right? And the LPL did win both major titles this time around in 2021. They won MSI and they won Worlds. But at Worlds, we had 3 teams in the semifinals, right? That counts for something. Also, Damwon only lost by 1 game at MSI, where, of course, as a region, it's hard to judge because there's only 1 team from each region, and it's the first place team. So, like, is the LPL better? Is the LCK better? I'm not sure. I just wanted to say, like, I think there's a ridiculous standard that sometimes people say, well, LCK was the best region for so long, and now they're not because they're not quite as good, not quite as dominant as they were in the past. In terms of T1 in 2015 versus T1 now in 2022, 2015 was 7 years ago. I think that back then that was the real first super team. Like, there were great teams back then, obviously. But the 2015 T1 was the first time people were like, this team is the best by far. And it was a much earlier time. It was when League of Legends was a much younger game. The scene was not as developed, and T1 had really struck gold with all their players, obviously.
It was just after the sister teams got crushed together
Yep.
as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yep. So it's like
it's like
really
Samsung
grinded.
loses all of theirs to China, and T1 consolidates all of theirs into one god
It was
team.
it was a perfect storm at the exact right time, very early on. So, like, that was then, and I think that's part of the reason why 2015 T1 dominated so hard as well, because of all of those things, especially in the LCK.
They
Where
lost
some
MSI
of-
though.
My God.
It's crazy that 2015 season. I actually looked it up earlier because I wanted to, like, look at those standings and see how it is. The standings at this moment of that season were so similar, and we had 2 super teams, basically the crushed sister teams of T1 and KT Rolster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is similar to the T1 Gen G super team situation we have here. I wanted to echo what Mao said about the fact that T1 started off ahead of everybody else in development, because I think that's the biggest point here. And, like, yes, there were the Gen G COVID situations, right, across the board. And there's a lot of jokes going around like, wow, T1, like, would they have won because everyone else got COVID, but they didn't? But T1, I think, has had the most consistent anti-COVID protocols. They've been very outspoken about that. Like, nobody can enter the building. Everyone has to be wearing gloves. Like, that's actually just a positive on them. Like, good job, T1. You guys kept your players safe, like, extremely well. For me, like, my biggest closing thought on, like, is the LCK weak? Is that why T1 has this 18-0 possibility? I think the bottom half of the LCK is extremely weak, but it's for a good reason. And last year at the end of summer, I, like, really wanted, and I made it very clear on PogState episodes, I really wanted teams to spend money. Keep these players, build a stronger roster, keep your talent, but also, like, bring some players back from LPL. And we know that players like the Shy, Scout, were also, being contacted, and they didn't end up coming back to Korea. Viper as well was considering coming back to Korea. We know this. They didn't return. But a lot of teams spent a ton of money to build up rosters. That's why we have this Nongshim roster that looks really great. KT's roster, pretty big upgrades across the board.
And that's
Kwangdong
one that
Freaks
came back, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's aiming coming back to Korea.
And Kwangdong Freaks also built a really awesome roster. And all the teams spent money, and, like, I think a lot of teams might, at this early stage, and a lot of fans at this early stage might be disappointed. But as we've seen, as you mentioned, Kwangdong's development, DRX's development with Deft coming back in, eventually we will have an extremely competitive LCK. Just like last summer. Remember last summer we were like, anyone can make playoffs, and, like, literally at most of that season, anyone could have made playoffs. I think, like, yeah, we're so lucky in that we have an awesome top four, which is really competitive, and the playoffs are going to be great. I think we're going to get that real T1 Gen G matchup in the finals. That's my prediction. But also, like, look to the summer season, LCK fans.
Yeah,
like, this region is about to get hot, I think. I think it's about to start
Yeah.
popping. Maybe
Also,
some
T1's gonna win
rosters,
MSI.
but
That's also going to happen, so maybe we can retain
really
that
hope so.
best region in the world
I've
title.
ever
Yeah.
since
Because we got to win everything to have
Yeah,
that
ever
happen.
since I've joined the LCK, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of pain, and I hope that pain can soon end with an international win.
We
The last-
needed. We actually, the whole reason the results have been the way that they have been is that we needed to indoctrinate Chronicler into the LCK the right way.
What do you guys think, to round out that T1 topic, like 2015 versus 2022? Because what I was going to say at the end of that point was, like, I think 2022 is actually more impressive
I'd
so
agree.
far. Like, just because of how far we've come in 7 years of League of Legends. Like, I think that having a team that's this strong.
I think
And yes, the region right now at the bottom rungs is a little bit weak, but, like, there's a lot of great competition in Gen G, Damwon-Kia, DRX. I think this might be the best team we've had in a very long time. I think, in my mind, they're better than Damwon was in 2020, but we have to see it at summer. Right?
Yeah, that's my main.
I think that's the problem.
It's
right?
definitely 100% the best team since 2020 summer Damwon. Whether it be better or not, I think, because Damwon also then went on to just Goomba stomp worlds. So if T1 then goes and, like, murders MSI, then I think that is pretty.
I think if
I'm
T1
confident
Pretty
in that
easy
right
take.
now.
if T1 dominates MSI and then loses 2-3 to an LPL team in the final,
I will cry.
I
a lot.
will immediately then say that they're the best team in the world and they will win worlds. Because
You've
history
learned.
cannot repeat itself that accurately without that coming true, okay? Because 2015, like, that was obviously the time where that happened to 2015 SKT, and that team, as the year went on, just got even better and even better and even better, and that was absolutely terrifying. And I think that that's where the comparison's hard, right? Because how much better can T1 get?
We don't have that info right
I
now.
don't think the ceiling is even close.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Zeus is as ludicrous as he is for a player that inexperienced, right? Is still not even close to where he's going to be.
I think Guma has room to grow as well.
Yes.
Like, he's very young, and he's right now, I think, in a place where, as a player, he's kind of just limit testing at times, where he knows he's really good, and he's sometimes cocky about it, and he has a good reason to be. A lot of the time.
I love it.
And that's because his team and him, they just absolutely wreck everybody that they come into contact with, and he's alongside of the best support in the world in my mind by far.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
Carrier
like,
doesn't
not
have
even
room to grow.
close.
He's
I don't
already
think it's
obtained
close.
perfection. Like,
For him, it's like, can he maintain?
how long? Yeah, how long
Yeah.
can he
that
be
level?
perfect? Is the real question for Carrier.
How long can he single-handedly carry this team?
One will probably be like, pull out that Echo support carrier. Give us the Zac.
Yeah, give
Go
us
get
the
him.
Zac. There it is. And you guys may have just watched a Zac support game that happens in the Fred Brion series. but we haven't seen
Guma
it
has
yet.
also said that like he's really frustrated with the win streak because he doesn't feel as stressed out. Like he feels like, oh, this is kind of like LCK is kind of free right now. Like we're just kind of rolling through and winning everything. And he's like, I used to show up for a match feeling like, oh my god, like I really have to kill it today, or like I have to carry, or maybe Team One won't win this really important series. But right now, like they've already guaranteed their playoff spot. They've already guaranteed round 2 of playoffs. They're very close to guaranteeing first place of the regular season. And as cool as it is to make history with records and stuff, he's already also now done that. Like he doesn't have to get the perfect season. He's just like, I want to feel stressed out. Like I want to feel the pressure. And I think we will see that in playoffs. And that's where T1 are really going to have to prove that like the 18-0, if they hit it, translates into an LCK final for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, Showmaker has been talking about. It's a very short point. Like Showmaker talked about this as well. That it's much harder to remain on top than it is to get to the top.
Yeah.
Right, and that's literally my only fear with T1 is that they peak in spring, and then they find it hard because the LCK actually doesn't give them enough, and then they're not in the best shape they could be. That's the only thing that like I'd be worried about. And if that's your worries, that's a pretty luxurious position. So like I'm not going to complain too much.
And also, another thing that I just want to do a bit of shouting out the LCK for a second, because we once again have, to bring up the format change. And we get to see 2 T1 matches instead of them waiting in the final and then never actually, like, getting to perform twice against 2 teams, right? And I think that is, like, a really, really cool thing. Like, we don't have lower bracket yet, but baby steps, we might get there, and then that might, give a little bit more
I don't want
excitement,
lower
but-
bracket unless we take one of the playoff teams away. Just on that note, like I don't want 6 teams in playoffs and then also double elimination in the LCK. Like how many chances can we?
No,
really
yeah,
get?
that definitely wouldn't that
Yeah.
wouldn't be a thing. But like, I think like I really, because I'm a fighting game fan, I just really like double elimination brackets because I think that it's hype. It's really exciting.
Big shout.
Yeah. But it's going to be really cool that we get to see them twice. And so I guess we're running pretty long. So I think that what we'll do is do a prediction of the finals
T1.
and how
Sorry.
much are T1 going to win it by and against who.
I think it's going to be incredibly hype if anyone takes a game off of T1
Yeah. I'm not
at
actually,
all.
No,
Like throughout the entirety of the playoffs. I think even if Gen G, like it goes like 1-1 in the finals, best of 5, I think people are gonna start going, rabid in the
Berserk.
eyes. They're gonna be like, oh my god, somebody can finally beat them. That's my prediction
I think-
for how hard
yeah.
I think they're going to be the favorites. here.
I do think that them dropping a game would not be surprising to me. Of course, their mentality might change in playoffs, but they've had both some happy gaming, which I do think that's maybe kind of a habit that's hard to really get rid of if you do find leads. And although recently it hasn't been a problem, they've had times where the drafts have been a little bit wonky. I think they have a really good read on the current meta, but maybe we'll see it swap during playoffs. Obviously, the expected finals will just be T1 Genji. Dark Horse suggestions will be DRX, although I'd still hold the dumb one. I have more faith in DRX than in DRX to make it a deep run, but I don't see Damwon or Genji really winning.
I personally think it's going to be a T1 Genji finals, and I've been saying that for a long time. But I just think that the gap between Genji and DRX and Damwon is so massive. The thing about the playoffs, there's like a world where in T1's round 2 match, if KT actually grow and actually pop off, like we could have a Telecom War semifinal. Like that's technically possible.
Wait,
Wolf sees the angles.
But I don't
Dang.
think it's going to happen. I think we'll see like a really cool semi between one of those top 4 teams and T1, and then T1 will meet Genji in the final because they'll be on the opposite side of the bracket because they're both top 2. But I think T1 will drop games because the meta is still pretty volatile, and I think there are a lot of ways this goes wrong in draft for T1, or they end up being too predictable, or the teams have so much to study from them. But I think they will win the finals. Like I think predicting against that right now is kind of a ridiculous thing to do, but I think they will drop games, and I think we will see some close series. Maybe like a 3-1 Genji final, like where they T1, of course, 3-1 Gen G in the grand final. Like, it's kind of what I'm feeling at the moment. Like, Dom1 Kia 3-1ing T1 in the summer finals last year. Like, I feel like that's the kind of finals we're going to get.
Yeah, because that was actually great finals, even though it was a free one.
Yep. I think it's going to be a 3-2 because we haven't seen T1
it.
versus Gen G's main roster yet. I think that there will be a little bit of teething during that series, but I think T1, it's not only that they rally after losses, but they're also really good at adapting their draft. And I think that sort of adaptation is going to lead to T1 being able to ultimately take the series. But I actually think it's going to be super hype. I think that the spring final is going to be really, really cool, especially with now, like, we know that Gen G and T1 are going to be waiting on other sides in separate semifinals. We now get to potentially have, like, T1 versus Dom1. They get their revenge in a 3-1 against Dom1 Kia, right? And then move up, wait in the final for a matchup of, like, Gen G versus DRX, which could be a lot of fun. I don't think it's going to be close, but certainly would be a lot of fun. So like, just the whole idea of, like, our top 4 facing off is going to be really cool. And there'll be some other matches before that.
Don't talk about those matches. Making playoffs is an achievement in of itself.
I mean, we'll probably have, like, what, KT versus Damwon and DRX versus Kwangdong, or vice versa. Or if Fred Brion make it in, like, replace Fred Brion with KT, or KT with Fred Brion. Like, those matches will be, like, the ones where we're like, like, you know, like, Kwangdong is, it could have the X Factor run, I guess, like, possibly, but probably not.
I think if it's Kwangdong and KT, there are certain matchups that I get, like, nervous about personally for, like, our top 4, right? For DRX and for Damwon. I think there are worlds, like,
yeah, there are ways. There are ways DRX
ways.
loses to Kwangdong, or Damwon Kia loses to Kwangdong. Like, I could see it. I could also see DRX losing to KT. Like, it could randomly
DRX
happen.
versus KT is definitely a scary situation.
and that's when you get the telecom or
everyone
semi.
involved.
Yeah. It's like KT,
No one
the
wins.
organization, getting its revenge on Deft face checking that brush in 2018 Worlds. You know, like, woo, we've come full circle. Okay, I think on that note, you guys have heard from us so many times on all of these predictions for the playoffs. I think that what we've come to agree on is the fact that the future for the LCK is extraordinarily bright. We're very, very proud of all of our players, whether they are here domestically or have traveled abroad, and we're looking forward so much to the final week of the LCK. Remember those hype matchups on Wednesday and Thursday, both the first ones. They are going to be so good, and we can't wait to be there with you while we watch them, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pog State.